I take a break for a vacation and come back and catch the flu, and now I find out that Netflix is buying Warner Brothers. What a timeline. Let's not bury the lead. Actually, current JSG here. Let's bury the lead. I recorded this video before Paramount decided to film stock block Netflix with a higher bid. They went full solo Sokoa. They're taking it all. That move deserves its own video, but I'm just letting everyone know that it happened. Anyway, from Deadline, quote, Netflix is officially buying Warner Brothers Discovery for a total enterprise value of $82.7 billion. The industry-changing deal will see Netflix paying $27.75 a share for the venerable Hollywood studio, with a total equity value of $72 billion. Netflix will acquire Warner Brothers, including its film and television studios, HBO Max, and HBO, subject to regulatory conditions, of which there will be several. The deal will follow after WBD's Global Networks division, Discovery Global, spins out into a new publicly traded company, a move that is now expected to happen in Q3 2026. So, this was bound to happen. Netflix is a $427 billion company. At some point, they were gonna try to buy some Hollywood studio, especially after Amazon snatched up MGM. We've seen this happen over the years with different companies, some of which have nothing to do with Hollywood, buying up studios. This is especially true with Warner Brothers, which has been bought out several times before. Now, Netflix wasn't the only one trying to buy out WB. Paramount and Comcast also made bids. In the grand scheme of things, any of the three buying WB is kind of a shitty play because all three companies have their quirks and problems. The worst aspect is the shrinking market, because now almost all of the major studios are either owned by former competitors or mega corporations. The situation with Netflix is unique though, because it's a streaming service, but WB is primarily a film studio that releases movies in theaters and then releases them on home media and then puts them on a streaming platform and cable. When I first saw the news about the buyout, plenty of articles asked what this means for theaters because WB pulls in lots of money and losing that revenue could crush the already struggling movie theater industry. According to the New York Times, Netflix claims that it will keep releasing WB movies in theaters. The article said that to keep up with the current operation, Netflix would need to put out at least 15 movies a year in theaters. However, in the Netflix statement about the buyout, Netflix co-CEO Greg Peter emphasized how much the acquisition would broaden the streaming service's online catalog. Quote, with our global reach and proven business model, we can introduce a broader audience to the worlds they create, giving our members more options, attracting more fans to our best-in-class streaming service, strengthening the entire entertainment industry, and creating more value for shareholders. Most of the commentary in that statement focuses on adding to the streaming catalog, not putting movies in theaters. That does raise a fair concern about the fate of WB movies. If Netflix wants to focus on getting more people on their platform, they may choose to limit theatrical releases to only the biggest titles and move films with smaller projected returns to the streaming service. The other co-CEO Ted Sarandos sort of implied that. From The Hollywood Reporter, quote, I'd say right now, you should count on everything that's planned on going to the theater through Warner Brothers will continue to go through theaters through Warner Brothers, and Netflix movies will take the same strides they have, which is some of them do have a short run in the theater beforehand, but our primary goal is to bring first-run movies to our members, because that's what they're looking for. Yeah, that's not a good sign. Movies already have short theatrical runs, so a rush to get them onto a streaming platform will just make that worse. It'll also affect the theaters. Like I said, WB movies are a massive draw. So losing that revenue to quick turnovers will hurt theaters enough that it could lead to some theaters closing. Then there's a home release market. Netflix is notorious for not releasing movies and shows on Blu-ray. I can't imagine that would change if the deal with WB goes through. I think it'd probably get worse. I could easily see Netflix holding off releasing older movies and shows so that the only way to view them is on the streaming platform. Add to this that Warner Brothers itself has already been kind of picky about releasing older films on updated formats like 4K. For people like me who prefer to own physical copies of movies and shows, this is a problem. There's a good chance that if the deal goes through, we might never get updated releases of older movies and shows, especially the stuff that's currently out of print. There's also the issue of existing deals Netflix did with other studios. For example, they have a deal with Sony to release a handful of movies, like K-pop Demon Hunters. I don't know how much of that deal has been fulfilled, and it's possible that by the time the Netflix WB buyout finishes, the terms of those deals would be over. But it does raise an interesting question about whether other studios like Sony will continue to do business with Netflix after the buyout. For another good example, Netflix has a deal with WWE Wrestling to stream Raw and their major events, but Warner Brothers has a deal with AEW for their shows and major events. So, what happens to that deal? Supposedly, the idea is to keep HBO Max separate from Netflix initially, which could keep AEW safe for a while, but that could change. Now, plenty of people are not happy about the buyout. A couple of celebrities and cinema groups have criticized it. The European cinema trade body UNIC, International Union of Cinemas, was particularly upset. By the way, that's a terrible acronym. Y'all clearly speak English, you can hear what it sounds like. UNIC. Why not just call it IUC? Especially since that's the correct acronym. Anyway, from Deadline, quote, explaining the organization's deep-seated concerns to the proposed deal, Laura Holgott, CEO of UNIC, commented, were it to be allowed to go ahead, this deal represents a double risk. If a studio disappears, that will inevitably mean that cinemas will have fewer films to screen for their audiences, leading to reduced income and significant cinema closures and job losses in the industry. In many ways, this is worse than the acquisition of one movie studio by another, as we saw with Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox a decade or so ago. She continued, in both its words and actions, Netflix has time and again made it clear that it doesn't believe in cinemas and their business model. Netflix has released only a handful of titles in cinemas, usually to chase awards, and only for a very short period, denying cinema operators a fair window of exclusivity. The most common concern comes down to the impact on theaters. Like I mentioned before, it does seem like Netflix plans on getting movies onto streaming as fast as possible, which will hurt theaters. The fewer theaters available, the fewer people who will go to see movies in theaters. The same goes for movies winding up on streaming. If people know a movie will be out on streaming in a few months, they might hold off going to theaters just because it's cheaper to wait. We've already seen this play out thanks to the pandemic. Movies go to Blu-ray and streaming way faster than they used to. Add in higher ticket and food prices, and it's easy to see why more people would choose to wait for the movie to come to streaming than to go to the theater. Nothing really compares to seeing a movie at the show, but if people can save money, they will wait. Another interesting question is what this means for DC Comics. The company is owned by Warner Brothers, so it would be part of the deal. Netflix isn't exactly known for publishing books, so there's a valid question to ask about what will happen to DC in all this. I suspect Netflix wouldn't close it down, but I could also see them changing how the company works, maybe changing the lineup of books, or even pushing to make tie-ins to some Netflix shows. There's also a question about what happens to James Gunn and his plans for the new DC films. Supposedly, everything currently set for theatrical release will still come out, but that might not be true for the TV shows, and I don't see Netflix not involving themselves in the DC universe. That could mean that whatever Gunn planned might get tossed out. Right now, all we've got is speculation, because it's not even clear if the deal will go through. If it does, it wouldn't go into effect until late 2026 or early 2027, because Warner Brothers still needs to spin off Discovery into its own entity. This will be interesting to watch because, ironically, Greg Peter is on record saying that these types of mergers never work. So we'll see if he makes it work, or if he's going to need an extra helping of salt when he eats those words. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.